Policymaking is powerful. And if you look at the past, you see how policies have been intentionally deployed to hold back entire communities. We cannot celebrate the benefits of legalization if we do not address the consequences of criminalization.
Your action today is about equity. It's about racial justice. While the order applies to all who meet its criteria, the impact is a triumphant victory for African Americans and other Marylanders of color who were disproportionately arrested, convicted, and sentenced for actions yesterday that are lawful today.
The President of the United States on a regular basis would blow off steam. Let's imagine saying something like, not, I want to have this leaker found and executed, but let's imagine he's just blowing off steam. He's saying, you know, if we could find that leaker, I'd like to take him out of the back of the White House on the South Lawn and have him shot. As a matter of presidential temperament, is that the guy you want to have behind as the commander-in-chief? Your vice president is on Capitol Hill in the middle of a riot that you have incited, and the people at that riot are talking about lynching the vice president. You don't have to get all the way to Donald Trump was ordering the execution of staffers to think that this is a very dangerous temperament and a very dangerous mindset to have.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced he has disbanded his war cabinet with no plans to replace the coalition. It comes just a week after cabinet member Benny Gantz left along with two other members. The coalition was initially created just days after the October 7th attack to manage the campaign against Hamas. Netanyahu is expected to get final approval for future war decisions from the wider security cabinet. Meanwhile, Israel's military says it will be pausing all fighting during daylight hours to get long-awaited humanitarian aid into Gaza. NBC News international correspondent Rob Sanchez has the details.
Hey there, a major shakeup in Israel today as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announces he is dissolving the war cabinet that has been responsible for managing the war in Gaza these last 8 months. Now remember, this unity cabinet was kind of a team of rivals. It included Netanyahu's political rivals who joined the Israeli government just after the October 7th attacks. They have now resigned from that body, saying they disagree with Netanyahu's vision for the future of the war, and the cabinet itself has now been dissolved. Now, this comes amid tensions between the Israeli government and the Israeli military over humanitarian aid inside of Gaza. The Israeli military announcing over the weekend it is putting in place these daily pauses of 11 hours to allow more humanitarian aid in through a specific area. This is eastern Rafah, near the Kerem Shalom crossing. The far right of Benjamin Netanyahu's government is blasting this decision. They say there should be less aid going to civilians in Gaza, not more. They say whoever made the decision to allow the aid in is a fool who should not be allowed to stay in his position. And an Israeli official is saying that Prime Minister Netanyahu himself apparently was unaware of this decision. He says it's unacceptable and that the fighting will continue in other areas of Rafah, specifically the west of that region near the coast, as previously planned. Now, all of this is happening during the Islamic holiday of Eid. You have families in Gaza who are trying to celebrate what is supposed to be a time of happiness when parents buy.
The very same day President Biden was rubbing shoulders with celebrities, former President Trump visited a Detroit church in a bid to court black voters.
President Trump, I'm so humbled that you would be here. President Obama never came to the hood, so to speak, right? President Joe Biden, he went to the big NAACP dinner, but he never came to the hood. So thank you. I believe
Joe Concha is a Fox Fox News contributor, and he joins us now. Joe, you would think that those pastors' comments would be at least a big part of the story covering this trip that Donald Trump took over the weekend. But here is the media coverage of it. The Washington Post writes, Trump portrays rampant crime in speech at Black church in Detroit. And the AP's headline is, Trump blasts immigrants for taking jobs as he courts voters at a Black church and MAGA event in Detroit. The tone of those headlines, Joe, is notable.
Portrays rampant crime. Yeah, like he's making it up. No, this is something that people are feeling in places like Detroit. Carly, Todd, great to see you, by the way.
Likewise.
And you know what's funny? I saw an X post from Don Lemon, the former CNN anchor, scare quotes, and he basically said it was impossible for him to believe that Donald Trump could possibly have that kind of black support in places like Detroit, with Don Lemon implying the whole scene you see, on your screen was likely staged somehow. It wasn't, and the momentum behind Trump is quite real. Not only among black voters, by the way, but Hispanic voters, independent voters, women voters, and according to a forecast released by The Economist over the weekend, Donald Trump now has a 69% chance of winning back the presidency, while Joe Biden's chances are 31%. That's less than 1 in 3. We've never seen numbers like this before for Trump. And turning to Hollywood may help Biden juice his numbers in places like Hollywood and Beverly Hills. Great. But it only underscores the fact that Democrats are now not the party of working men and women as they used to be, but as the party of elites in coastal cities east and west. And while its leader, by the way, in Joe Biden, in public appearances, like we saw at the G7, looks more like the Madame Tussauds version of himself, looking like he was injected with formaldehyde, right? So Donald Trump, if he has 15% support among black voters in Michigan, according to one poll, other numbers have him higher than that. That may sound small on the surface, but it's not. If those numbers hold in places like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, among black voters, Joe Biden is burnt toast, Todd.
I think you nailed the key point here. This is less and less about black versus white, minority versus white. This is more about elites versus the rest of us. And I think that's what that appearance underscored most of all. Also, Joe, one thing we'll be watching for this week in the media, we'll probably talk to you about it later on. How is the media going to spin Barack Obama guiding Joe Biden off stage this weekend? Because last week, when it was the situation there watching the paratrooper land, it was Trump has dementia. Somehow that came out of thin air.
Made the cover of the New York Post, so we did see it there. Joe, thank you for joining us. Have a great day.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.
This is the room where Reform UK launched its contract.
I genuinely feel that Britain is broken.
They're not calling it a manifesto, they're calling it a contract because they say manifesto means too many broken promises. This is the document itself. One of the policy areas that the party's really concentrating on is immigration. They want to freeze what they call non-essential immigration. So that's the number of people who can come to the UK to live and to work. They want to freeze on that with exceptions for people who work, for example, in the health and social care sector. They're also talking about some tax cuts. One big tax cut the party's proposing is the level of your earnings before you start paying income tax. And part of the way they say they would fund all of this is cutting down on wasteful government spending. They think they could get about £50 billion a year out of it. There has been quite a lot of attention on Reform UK, not least since Nigel Farage came back to the fore. And what they say they want to do is become the party of the opposition in the next parliament.
Hello and welcome to your election headlines. I'm Rita Chakrabarti. The leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, launched his party's election pledges in Merthyr Tydfil with a promise to cut income tax, allocate an extra £17 billion a year to the health service, cut fuel and stamp duty and freeze all non-essential immigration.
Our aim and our ambition is to establish a bridgehead in Parliament and to become a real opposition to a Labour government.
Ben Chu from BBC Verify has been assessing how the cost of Reform's tax and spending pledges, amounting to billions of pounds, compare to the other parties.
Here's Reform's £141 billion. As you can see, Reform and the Greens really tower over the other parties. And public finance experts feel that while individual elements of the latter two parties might be coherent, they feel that overall there is a lack of credibility.
Meanwhile, a gas platform in the North Sea was the venue for Rishi Sunak, who said he was fighting hard for every vote because he believed the Conservatives can win the election. He said it was a choice between Conservative tax cuts or Labour tax rises. Labour focused on a new national wealth fund, which it claims would help create 650,000 jobs over 5 years. The plan would involve investing more than £7 billion, paid for, Labour say, by imposing a windfall tax on big oil and gas companies, plus government borrowing. SNP leader John Swinney says his party will argue for what he calls a social tariff, where people who are elderly, disabled or on low incomes pay lower energy bills. Speaking in Stornoway, Mr Swinney said it will be funded by general taxation and what he called an obligation on the profits of energy firms. Sir Ed Davey was campaigning at the beach in Paignton. The Liberal Democrats want an expansion of fuel duty relief for rural motorists to 20 areas, including Devon, Cornwall, Cumbria and Shropshire. The Lib Dem leader said it would be a real rescue plan to support rural communities. And if you want to keep across all that's happening in this election, do head over to our dedicated section on our website at bbc.co.uk/election 2024. And those are your election headlines for June the 17th.